Good evening, everybody, and welcome to members and officers to this planning meeting of the 20th of October. As always, a little bit of housekeeping, if I may. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs. If you use the lift, there are stairs at that end, also to the door on my right to your left. Please assemble on Hawley Square Green, and an officer will come over to bring you back in if that is necessary. Could I ask if anybody intends filming this meeting this evening? No? Okay, thank you very much. Also, I would ask you that not to use mobile phones, turn them to silent, and please do not make phone calls or take phone calls during the meeting. I've said this at a few meetings, members and to members of the public. We get quite a few requests from members of the public about planning applications. I don't want anybody to think that we ignore them. There are rules and regulations about us answering them in different ways. I'm not saying that we shouldn't just say to you we've accepted them, but please don't think they've been ignored. I'm speaking as myself, and I'm sure I'm speaking with members of the committee here this evening, and of course officers. Thank you. Members are requesting to speak under 20.1. Are there any members wishing to speak? 20.1? No, I don't see any. Public speaking this evening. The following applications have been reserved for public speaking. Would members please note the following items on the agenda. Item 5A, 22 Danecourt Gardens, Broadstairs. Item 5D, 91 Botany Road, Broadstairs. Item 5F, W.S. Cole & Son, 116 Monkton Street, Monkton. And item 5G, land rear of 92 to 102 Monkton Street, Monkton. I have 2 points of information. Would members please note that agenda item 5C, harbour amenities at the East Cross Wall at Ramsgate, has tonight been withdrawn from your agenda. Also, another point of information, I'll hand over to Mr. Livingston, the Planning Applications Manager.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points of information. First one on agenda item 5F, which is 116 Monkton Street. The description of development is updated to more accurately reflect the enlargement of the existing storage building to a single-storey retail unit. Currently, the description reads a change of use of the existing structure. So now the description, or this part of the description on that application, is updated to read change of use and enlargement of existing storage building to a single-storey retail unit. Another point of information for members on agenda item 5G, land to the rear of 92 to 102 Monkton Street. Subsequent to the publishing of the Planning Committee schedule, the received legal agreement to secure the proposed planning obligations, including affordable housing and financial contributions, has been ratified and sealed by the Council. Now, this means that the recommendation on agenda item 5G, on item 5G, is changed from the recommendation being defer and delegate to officers to approve subject to receipt of a legal agreement and safeguarding conditions, and that is changed to approve subject to the stated conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I have received apologies from Councillor Rozeski and Councillor Hart. Any other apologies, please? Councillor Alban. Any other apologies at all? No substitutes. Sorry, it's Councillor Schonk. Councillor Schonk is substituting for Councillor Hart. Thank you very much. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Keane. Thank you. And for members, Councillor Keane obviously has declared that interest. When we come to that item, Councillor Keane will be asked to leave the chamber. Councillor Shonk.
I have to show an interest because I do know the Cole family in Monkton Minster.
Thank you. I will take advice on that, Councillor Shonk, to see whether you have to leave. I think a lot of people do know the Cole family at Minster, Monkton. I'll take advice on that when we come to that. Thank you. Agenda item 3, the minutes of the Planning Committee, which was held on the 15th of September. Do members agree that the minutes of that Planning Committee, which was held on the 15th of September 2021, be approved and signed by myself? Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Coleman-Cook. Seconder, please. Councillor Wright, several there. Do members agree that I sign those as correct? Thank you very much. Agenda item 4, the Garden Centre, Montefiore Avenue, Ramsgate. I will ask the planning officer now, which I believe is, Mr. Livingston, please, to outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is the application for a warehouse with canopy for the use for the garden centre at Ramsgate on Montefiore Avenue. Members visited it a few weeks ago on Friday, and we looked at the service yard where the proposal is due to be constructed. So the application site is outlined in red on the screen. The particular area that this application is in is currently used for open storage, as mentioned. So it's the area where the mouse is at the south of the parking area. And this is the proposed footprint of the warehouse. So the proposal is for the use of this warehouse for storage of out-of-season goods, fixtures and fittings, and various elements of things that are currently stored in a trailer, which there is a photo of from the site visit here. So it's currently parked storing a number of goods for the garden centre. Members looked inside the storage area and considered the arrangements in terms of vehicles moving in and out of that current area used for, in part, deliveries, but predominantly for the storage of various products for the garden centre. In terms of the relationship with the neighbouring properties of the proposal, this photo is showing the rear of properties in Muir Road. This is a view towards properties on Brindle Grove, where currently obviously the waste is stored. And then this is towards the back of the garden centre, towards properties on Hearson Road. So in terms of the relationship with the neighbouring properties, the proposal, there's an 18.5 separation distance with the properties on Muir Road. The proposal originally, when it was submitted in the previous application, was refused for being too high and therefore too imposing on the residents in causing a sense of enclosure. It was reduced by 2.5 metres in this current application, so it's 4 metres to the eaves height. This is the proposed south elevation. To the right hand side of the image you can see there's a level change to the properties on Brindle Grove, with a canopy that means that the roof is pitching away from the properties on that road. Then you have this elevation, which if you were to go into the yard area and turn left, this is what you would be addressed with. And then this is the rear elevation, so facing towards the car park, just to again show that the property or the proposal is pitching away from the boundary with the Brindle Grove properties. So as mentioned, the Brindle Grove properties are on the right hand side of the image and Muir Road at the bottom here. So as I mentioned, the proposal is for the storage use of this warehouse structure. There is a condition which is proposed to link it to the use of the garden centre, so that it couldn't be used for an independent business or commercial entity. Concerns on site were raised about how it may impact on Sunday trading hours, as well as the issues that were talked about in the last meeting about when deliveries could occur to the site. As mentioned in the previous meeting, there are no existing restrictions on when deliveries can occur for the garden centre. What's being proposed in this application is deliveries occurring from 7 a.m. Or the use of the warehouse from 7 a.m. onwards. And another query that came up both on site and in the meeting was about how deliveries actually occur. Is there sufficient turning for vehicles in this yard, given that there's now going to be this storage building here? Vehicles are able, using the car park area, to reverse into that yard. And in fact, members will recall that one actually occurred when we were present on the site visit. So overall, we consider as officers that the previous issues for the application that was refused have been resolved, and therefore, subject to conditions, the development is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. I move the officers' recommendation is adopted. Could the Vice Chair please second? Thank you, Councillor Coleman. Cook. All right, you're miles away there. Members, do you wish to debate at all? I will just say, if I may, as we know, site visits are around about 9 o'clock on a Friday morning normally, and I also understand that it is difficult for some people to get along because of work and so on, but obviously the site visit did go ahead. Councillor Hopkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Just to update, Councillor Moore and myself have received a letter from the British Garden Centre, the developer, about this afternoon, following a meeting that they were very forthcoming and speaking to residents, and that was helpful. And just on they have made a couple of concessions or suggestions. One about the opening hours. They've said that they would be happy in this letter to us to restrict the use of it from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And they've also said that they are happy to keep consulting with residents about the painting of the warehouse and the colour of it. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's provision for if that could be, if the panel is minded to accept this, if that could be put in as a condition of consent, if panel is minded is to give it consent. Yeah, I mean, there are still concerns of residents about the noise. One resident has said to me that they feel there hasn't been an independent review carried out of noise, effects of this. I wonder if officers can confirm if that's the case or not, and if it's not the case, if that is something which could still be considered.
Thank you, Chair. So on to the first point, what's proposed at the moment in front of members in terms of the motion is for deliveries to be restricted, or use of the premises restricted to the hours of 7 till 6, Monday to Sunday. Obviously, we received a copy of the letter that was sent earlier today, which indicates that the applicant was prepared to accept a condition, if considered appropriate by the planning committee, for deliveries to occur from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So there's a difference there between use of the building and obviously deliveries, because obviously it may be that someone accesses the building to move stuff around. If members felt that that condition in terms of deliveries to the warehouse was necessary to be restricted, then the motion would need to be amended, and that condition would need to be sort of built into the motion, which would need both the chair and vice chair to agree to withdraw the current motion, to amend it, and then put it back in front of members. In terms of the second point, with regards to the impact from noise and disturbance, there is no noise impact assessment that's being carried out for the proposed development. Predominantly that's because the existing relationship is considered to be to create a level of background noise from the fact that it's an open storage yard, clearly in use with deliveries in the open, and therefore that it's the proposed warehouse doesn't make the situation any worse. There are arguments about whether or not it makes it better, and obviously that's something that was discussed last month about whether or not there could be vibrations, etc., within that could cause an impact, or indeed that whether or not you've, in some form of insulation that would come with the panels that would be used, would insulate it. But there's certainly no, in our view, no worsening of the existing impact from the fact that you've got an open storage use there at the moment, which is clearly operating in close proximity to neighbours.
Thank you for that, Ian. Members, is there any more comment before I put this to the vote? I will say this to members of the public. I know committee members know this, but when I have a chat as chair to an officer, it has been noticed I get advice, and that's all it is. And I think any chair of any committee, there has been some comments in previous meetings, and I just wanted to make that clear. I get advice which any member of this committee can get, so that's the reason we chat. Thank you.
So just to come back to what Councillor Hopkins has mentioned, if there is agreement with the chair and the vice chair to withdraw the motion, then if a new motion was put forward, to add a condition, we would still retain the existing condition, which is the use could occur between 7 and 6, but for delivery specifically for that unit, it's from 8 to 6, and it's that unit. I think this is an important point. It's only to that unit because that's all that we're actually considering. It's not to the garden centre because they could have other deliveries at the moment. It's just to this unit.
Thank you, Ian. You've heard that, members. I'm going to put this to you. That, yes. Yep. Yep. So you've heard what our officer has mentioned, that I agree to withdraw this motion. I would like the Vice Chair to second.
Second that, Chair.
Thank you. And members, do you agree? Okay, and we come back to Ian again.
So just to confirm, sorry about this, just for absolute clarity, we'll then put forward a motion which would need to be forwarded and seconded by Chair and Vice Chair to move for approval of the conditions as outlined, plus a condition restricting deliveries to that unit between 8 and 6 p.m.
Thank you. I think members understand what Mr. Livingston has said there. I do propose that, and I'd like the Vice Chair to second.
I'll second that, Chair.
Members, if you're happy with that would you please show your hand, please? Approval? Against? Abstentions? One abstention. Thank you, members. That has been carried. Thank you for that. Moving on to agenda item 5, the schedule of planning applications and public speaking. Any site visits will take place for committee members on, this is a good day, on the 5th of November 2021, which I believe is a Friday. So agenda item 5A is the planning application for approval for 22 Dane Court Gardens, Broadstairs. Speaking in favour of the application is Mr. Bragg. Is Mr. Bragg with us this evening? Thank you, Mr. Bragg. You have 3 minutes, and if you push a button on the mic, please.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Daniel from SE Architecture. We're the agent for this application and speaking to you now on behalf of the applicant. As you are aware, this application concerns an extension and redevelopment of an existing detached dwelling to a good-sized 3 to 4 bedroom family home, something that we are all seeing more and more of in recent years. We have worked hard with the applicant and the case officer for several months to find solutions that are acceptable, solutions that address and overcome all of the objections received for this application. The applicants have already made numerous compromises to the design, including removing parts of the first floor accommodation, removing and obscuring certain windows, and lowering the proposed roof line to reduce the overall scale. The scheme now in front of you is the end result, and we hope will create a fantastic home for the applicants and their children to enjoy. The applicants are a young family and never anticipated anything like the opposition they have faced to their application, which has been noted within the redacted objections on the council website. It has unfortunately become a difficult and upsetting experience for them, but one that we all soon hope will be worthwhile. The various objections received appear to be based on a general dislike of the scheme, with very few valid planning reasons. The crux of these objections appears to be the introduction of first floor development and a fear that this proposal will change the character of the area for the worse. The applicants purchased this property last year, having found a road and an area they liked, and seeing a house with potential. They saw the building work completed at the next door house, number 23, and used this as an inspiration to plan the transformation of their own bungalow. Number 23 was granted permission to extend vertically without any objections, and now appears uniquely different to every other house in the area. This has certainly opened up an opportunity to be creative and do something similar with the applicant's site. Furthermore, other examples of first floor accommodation have sprung up on the road. A similar scheme to the proposed is currently under construction at number 61, and another planning application is under consideration a few doors along at number 18, suggesting that the perception of this area as small bungalows is outdated. Indeed, the planners themselves highlight that there are no planning policy objections to the addition of first floor accommodation to bungalows. The case officer is satisfied that the setback position of the house and separation that exists to the surrounding properties means the proposed extensions would not cause harm to the living conditions of the neighbours. The officer also acknowledges that the large portions of the proposal are almost permitted development anyway. Increasing the original dwelling is by no means an overdevelopment of the site, as this is a wide and excellent sized plot here, which will still retain a large garden to the rear and an equally large driveway area at the front capable of accommodating 4 cars. So to highlight and put things into perspective, with the proposed extensions, the total footprint of the house and garage will be 147 square metres. By comparison, the extended footprint of the next door house and garage at number 23 is actually larger at 174 square metres. The planners conclude that no material harm would be caused to the character or appearance of the area, and we believe that says it all. We trust you will agree with their conclusion. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bragg. Raising points of concern is Ms. Wood, if Ms. Wood is there.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we find the report in favour of approving this application to be contradictory, lacking neutrality and sometimes inaccurate. All measurements contained within the report are approximate, plus the small print on the plans clearly states do not scale from the drawings. The report states that Dane Court Gardens comprises predominantly of detached bungalows and chalet bungalows, giving the impression that there is a variety of property types and as many chalet bungalows as bungalows. In fact, the area comprises almost totally of bungalows. We disagree entirely, therefore, that the proposed development is generally in keeping with the area, especially as in any case it resembles more a large house than a chalet bungalow. The report repeatedly fails to make the distinction between permitted development and that which requires planning permission, using inappropriate examples of permissible development to justify this approval of this application, such as referring to the proposed 5.3 metre high wall along the boundary line of number 23 as having a similar impact to a 3 metre high single storage garage that is allowed under permissible development. We would argue that there is a great difference between the two in terms of enclosure, overbearing impact, loss of outlook and light. Since the plans have been amended and now no longer require accommodation above the garage, we would ask why the garage could not be of a flat roof construction and built to a standard garage size. The author goes on to compare the construction of a dormer window as having a similar level of overlooking and reduction of privacy as a first floor extension. We feel the author has again grossly underestimated the difference between the two. According to the quoted Thanet local plan, new development must not lead to overlooking or a loss of privacy, and yet in this new development, as indeed recognised in the report, would result in both. This may be acceptable on a housing estate as seemingly implied in the report, but it is both incongruous and unacceptable on an essentially bungalow estate. The area along the boundary line of number 23 is not a driveway, as stated in the report. It is in fact a kitchen garden, and moreover the only private amenity space available to this property. Both Broadstairs Town Council and the Broadstairs Society, as well as neighbours, have strongly opposed this application, and we entreat the committee to consider their comments. TDC recently refused permission to build a chalet bungalow on the opposite side of the road, which would have been overdevelopment and out of character. The application to build 3 detached houses in the lane to the northwestern side of Dane Court Gardens was also refused by TDC just last year, with one factor being that they were out of keeping with adjacent bungalows. We believe that the same compelling reasons for refusal should be applied in this case, and ask the committee to vote against approval, or in the very least to defer until a new review of the application can be made. What is clearly a 4-bedroom development is being submitted under the guise of a 2-bedroom chalet bungalow. Excluding the garage, they are increasing the living space from 74 square metres to 167 square metres, which is clearly overdevelopment.
Thank you very much, Ms Wood. I would like to ask the planning officer, which is Ian, to outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. The application site is outlined in red. The proposal is for a roof extension, front and rear dormer windows, with an increase in ridge height and front and side extensions. So the main issues for consideration by members are the impact on the character and appearance of the area and the impact on the living conditions of neighbouring properties. So this is an aerial image years ago of the site. So the property in question is in the centre of the image. So you can see this is formed, this is a property that's within the Dane Court Gardens estate. To take some other angles, just to show you a bit of a wider angle context, you can see the fact that predominantly all the properties in this area are single storey with bungalows. There are some properties that have extended at the rear in terms of dormer windows, including the one at the end of this particular cul-de-sac, and there are some specific examples of 2-storey properties, chalet bungalows with dormer windows at first floor towards the eastern extent of the estate, but predominantly they are single-storey bungalows. There are variations in design. You can see from the roof form, so you've got some with gable ends, some with hip roofs. Then just moving around, you can see in a bit more detail the fact that the existing bungalow at the end number 20 has done a rear dormer window at some point. You can also see the property in question here in the centre of the image. So you have number 21, which is to the west, but obviously to sort of close to the bottom of this image, and 23. You can see that the siting of the dwellings is slightly different. It's slightly staggered in comparison to the application site. So this is the property at the moment. Then if we look to the left-hand side, which is number 21, so that's the property that's obviously set back from the front building line of number 22. And then just going to show you the existing bit of the existing relationship with number 23. So this is the design of number 23, which was extended a few years ago. And so this is the existing relationship with the neighbour at number 23. So mentioned in the public speaking is the garden area that's behind where the car is parked here. So it's between the other side of this fence and the main side wall of the property. We'll have a little look at that relationship in a little bit. So you've got a garden area there. You've got the existing bungalow set off with a garage at the back. So just looking at the opposite side of the road, you can see that you've got bungalows on the opposite side of the road, but you can see there's actually a change in levels. Indeed, there's a change in level across most of the estate, with some being sort of further up a hill. And these properties are obviously set up from the street level opposite with, again, you've got a hipped roof there, a gable end roof, and then a gable end frontage on those properties. So at the rear of the application property, you currently have that change in level in effect, where you've got some stairs down from the existing ground floor. This is the rear roof slope, which we'll talk about when looking at the proposed rear dormer window. Then looking to number 21, so that's the property that's set back, and you can see that set back when looking at the side elevation of that property at the moment. This is looking down the garden towards number 24, which is at the rear. So you can see that the garden is perpendicular to the garden of the application site number 22. And then turning to the right and looking towards the side elevation of number 23, the neighbouring property, you've also got a garage here, which is on the application site, which is proposed to be demolished as part of the application. And you can see that at the moment the rear of number 23 protrudes past the rear of number 22. So the proposal, as mentioned, would increase the footprint of the existing bungalow with front extensions as well as a side extension with a new roof effectively wrapping over those extensions. There is also a proposed decking area to the rear, which has previously had planning consent. So this is the existing property that we've seen in the images. This is the proposal. The existing property's outline is in red, the red dotted line. So what's happening here, and we'll see this on the side elevation, is that you can see that the roof at first floor is pitching away. The roof pitch is staying the same as existing, but that pitch is coming closer to the road. So we'll see that on the side elevations. You can also see the mentioned garage in terms of the roof of that garage, which has been reduced in height from the previously submitted scheme when the application first came in, but still does have that roof which has been mentioned in speeches. So then looking at the side elevation, so this is the side elevation that faces number 23. So at the moment you've got these sort of higher level windows that are in there at the moment. So what's being proposed, and you'll see where the roof pitch goes. So the roof pitch is the same pitch, but the roof pitch starts from a closer point to the road, which would be on the left of the image. So you can see that you've got then the side dormer windows, sorry, the front dormer window and the rear dormer window, as well as the barn hip design. So the materials that are proposed are for glaze slate roof, so it's grey cedral weatherboarding on the actual dormer windows themselves, and white smooth render below. So the materials aren't considered to be uncharacteristic of the area, given that there are cladding examples in the vicinity, and there are changes in roof tiles in and around the overall estate. So the materials are considered to be acceptable. Just to look at that relationship with the neighbour then, what is occurring is an increase in the scale of the property directly adjacent to the boundary to number 23. So if the height of the eaves at the moment, which is obviously set away from the boundary, is about 2.8 metres from the ground level on that property. So that effectively would move closer to the neighbouring property on the boundary, but then that height would increase from 2.8 metres at the eaves height up to the eaves height of the barn hip to 4.6 metres. And so this is one of the main impact considerations that's gone into the report in terms of what's the impact on that neighbour. So you can see that there are windows that are discussed in the report on the side elevation. So these windows currently obviously look towards the side fence of number 22. These windows from the previous planning application are stated to serve a bathroom and a bedroom, so it's a bathroom and a habitable room. So the officer's report has looked at the question about what would be permitted development, and obviously permitted development would allow for an eaves height of a side extension up to 3 metres. So there is an increase over what will be allowed through permitted development from this. It is considered, though, that there is obviously limited outlook from these windows at the moment. Obviously they are side windows, which are considered different from front and rear windows in terms of what you would expect to find in terms of the outlook. But that impact is certainly a consideration for members to look at. It has been considered by officers that given that there is a permitted development fallback, not to the same extent, and also given the existing relationship, that this relationship is acceptable. In terms of looking at the other side elevation, you've got, this is the view at the moment facing number 21. That again would increase in the same way, so you can see that the roof pitch is the same, but it just pitches to a higher point. So the increase in ridge height is about 1 metre, with then obviously, as I said, the dormer windows at the front. So the windows at ground floor will not change on that side elevation. So in terms of the increase in footprint of the property, it's not considered by officers that the scale of the footprint is out of keeping with the scale of development in the vicinity. And you can see as well, in terms of the impact from the decking at the rear, where it's sited does not result in our view as to a significant loss in privacy of the neighbouring properties from any overlooking created. One of the other relationships that's really important to consider is the impact on the neighbours to the rear, number 24. Because in the rear elevation, at the moment, obviously you've got the image that we saw earlier with the roof slope, And what's being proposed here is obviously an enlargement, and you can see the dotted red lines, as well as then the dormer window that's being inserted to the rear. Now, within the existing roof slope, there would be the potential to have a smaller dormer window within that existing roof slope, and obviously this is visible from a property further down at number 20, which has the same pitch and has put in a rear dormer window. Now, it's noted that this dormer window is obviously, as you can see, larger than what you would accommodate within the existing roof slope, and it obviously has likely, more. It's obviously got two windows either end, both serving bedrooms, and a bathroom window in the centre. So we've looked at the permitted development fallback of what could be done at the moment, and there is within permitted development the ability to create a rear dormer which would have an impact on the neighbouring property to the rear. And if I go back, you can see that you've got the rear garden of that neighbouring property there. So if we move through the floor plans, I'll then show you the roof plan, and you can see how big that dormer is, and we can talk about the relationship with the neighbour a bit more. So this is the existing floor plan of the property, and this is what's being proposed. So you have on the ground floor, on the left-hand side image, you have the garage on the side, and then upstairs you have 2 bedrooms, so either side 2 bedrooms, and then a bathroom in the centre. So in terms of then that roof plan, you've got then the rear dormer window as shown. So that rear dormer window is 12 metres to the boundary at the rear, and so this has led to the report obviously considering that point about the fallback decision, and therefore there will be an impact from this proposal on that neighbour to the rear, but there is a distinct possibility and weight to be given to the fallback position, which could create a dormer window there without needing planning permission to create a similar relationship with regards to windows looking into that neighbouring property at the rear. Now, in terms of then other issues to do with the scale of development, it is considered that there are variations in the style of bungalows in the area. We've looked at the photos that show hipped roof properties, gable end properties, and officers don't consider that the fact that there is a front dormer window is significantly out of character with the wider area to cause harm. It's not overly visible as a property. It's obviously down a cul-de-sac, and therefore it's not a prominent position within the estate. Mention's been made of developments in the vicinity, specifically the development next to this estate, which is the site on Greensleeves. In that instance, they were 2-storey properties, and that's 2-storey properties to the eaves, which was a point that the inspector pointed out about the difference between this estate and single-storey buildings, and obviously the full 2 storeys. So we don't consider that the chalet bungalow style that's been proposed is out of keeping with the area. There is variety, and nor is the scale considered to be cramped and congested. The impact on the neighbours has been considered, but weight has been given to the permitted development fallback, as well as the specific existing relationships. It is a balanced case, but on balance, officers have considered that the application should be approved, and that's the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ian. I move the officer's recommendation is adopted. Because the Vice Chair, please second.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman Cook. Members. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted a bit of clarification. So the roof of the garage, that was going to be a habitable space, but now then it's not. It's just a roof. In which case, why isn't it more reduced?
So it has been reduced in terms of the accommodation or storage areas that have been reduced in that. So obviously a request was made to lessen that in terms of the impact on the character and appearance of the area, rather than have the full width of the property taken up by a ridge height that's as high as it is. Obviously what's then been proposed is to reduce it by the extent that's been put forward. So we've considered it on the merits of what's been put forward. In terms of the rationale behind that particular point of design, that's the application that's been submitted, or the plans that have been submitted. It is obviously a consideration by members as to whether or not the overall scale, including that element of that roof, is acceptable, as well as also the impact on the neighbouring properties, which is the main thing to look at for that.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the report. I'm familiar with this estate, with this bungalow estate. In fact, it's in my ward, and I did call this in because of the number of the concerns that were shared about this application. I think calling it a chalet bungalow, a chalet extension, is pushing it slightly. It does look like a two-storey house to me. But I think one of my main concerns, one of the main concerns of the Broadstairs Town Council and the Society mentioned that this is a bungalow estate, and it was formed as a bungalow estate. You mentioned Greensleeve. The Greensleeves decision that was rejected by yourselves went to the planning inspector. The planning inspector upheld that rejection. And in fact, at our recent training course, you mentioned that. And one of the things the inspector said was that he upheld it because it was at odds with the adjacent bungalow estate. So it's recognised as a bungalow estate, and I think it's important that it should stay as a bungalow estate. I know there have been a number of dormers that you mentioned installed in some of the other bungalows, but they still remain bungalows, such whereas this, I think, would be, looking at it, is more or less turning it into a house. So I think that's my main concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Any other members wish to? Councillor Jill Pickford.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do agree with a lot of the comments that Councillor Garner's made. I can't see this as a shallow bungalow. I think the increase in footprint is considerable, as is the bulk and scale of the development. I understand the comments about permitted development, but then why not stick to what is permitted development? I personally feel that this is out of keeping with the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paul.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to reaffirm what both Councillor Bayford and Councillor Garner have said, they've covered all my points, so I'm not in favour of this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Shonk.
I might live in Ramsgate, but I do know the area. It is bungalows. Always has been bungalows. I know there's some deviations. But I think we must really think about Broadstairs Council, Broadstairs Society. And I think it's overload. I think it's an impact on the neighbourhood, and that will keep them in the area. People live here. I don't know how many objections you had. It is a concern. It is a lovely area. All bungalows mainly. That's my concern.
Thank you. Coming back to Councillor Keane.
Thank you. I just think, I agree there's lots of bungalows there, but there is a house or a higher building right next door. So I'm kind of not seeing the difference. There is a variation in this area.
Thank you. Do I see any other members before I put this to the vote? Okay, members, thank you for your input there. So I am putting this to the vote. For those in favour of this application, will they please raise their hands? Those against? Abstentions? That has fallen. Right, I will turn to Mr.
Thank you, Chair. So what's been clearly outlined by members is a concern about the scale and design of the proposal. In terms of potentially moving a motion on that basis, we would recommend, given the debate, that the issue is with regards to the scale and design would appear dominant, out of keeping with the predominant form of development, resulting in significant harm to the character and appearance of the area. And the particular policy in this instance is policy QDO2, which is the character and appearance policy, as well as the relevant Broadstairs neighbourhood plan policy as well.
Thank you, Ian. So therefore, I've put that to you, members.
You'd have to move it.
No, I will propose that. So could I have a seconder, please? And you understand, obviously, so members, you've heard what Mr Livingston has said. Do you accept that? A show of hands, please. And those against? Abstentions? That has been carried. That has been refused. Thank you. Moving on again to agenda item 5D, which is the planning application for refusal of 91 Botany Road, Broadstairs. Speaking in favour of the application is Ms Gibson, if you're there. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. Firstly, I want to say thank you for taking the time to hear me speak and also to discuss our application. This application, I also want to introduce my sister, she's ready to jump in because I get a bit upset when I talk about this. This application is one that's filled me with great heartache and upset, and seems to have overshadowed quite a lot of what should be joyful things in the last 3 years. The day my second child was born, I had an inspector the very day there having a look at the dormer. And it feels like it's just due to my naivety, being a teacher, not a property developer, and never having done anything like this before, that has led to us now being in a situation where we're having to appeal for a retrospective planning. 3 years ago, we started building on our home. A home that I bought from my father-in-law, that was my husband's childhood home, and one that we wanted to be our forever home. It became apparent that the architectural drawings were inaccurate, and the building inspector said that it would be okay for us to make the dormer slightly larger. We continued building in our ignorance, unaware of the fatal error that we were making. Unfortunately, we then had further problems. The roofer defrauded us of £5,000, and in the interest of being respectful and transparent with the council, I applied for a change of condition because it was November and our home was exposed to the elements. Unfortunately, that was too little too late, and all of our ceilings fell down on everything that we owned, and my eldest son's nursery included. We're a little bit confused as to why we're finding ourselves in a situation where we are having to keep appealing and trying to get applications through, because there are so many down our road with similar, if not identical, features in terms of length, width, and the finish on them. There's one down the end that's changed shape so that it's none other down the road and has cedar cladding. There's even one 4 doors down that has just been granted permission for 2 dormers longer than my dormer. And it's, despite the 6 objections that it's received from neighbours, it's still been granted permission with cladding. We've never had any objections to ours. We've only ever had letters of support, and we're currently in the same situation. We have 76 letters of support, 6 of which are from our neighbours. And I know it isn't the case, but we can't help but feel a little victimised and a little like we're being made an example of. We are at a breaking point with this, financially, emotionally, mentally, and the thought of having to tear our home down is heartbreaking. We have managed to secure some finances from family so that we can put some hanging toes, to try to help with the appearance of this. We just cannot financially, we can't afford to do this. My father-in-law's health is failing and he wants to move in, and we can't even offer that as an option because there's a potential that our home could be torn down around us. So we are hoping that you just find some compassion, please, to help end this nightmare for us so that we can actually enjoy our home. If you're still of a view to turn this down, I please recommend that you visit, and I'm happy to have you do a site visit or whatever you need to do. And thank you for listening. Sorry.
Please don't apologise. This committee and myself and officers understand your feelings. I will ask Emma now, please, to give her report.
Thank you, Chairman.
Could I ask you to push the little button to turn your microphone off, please? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, so this is the application site outlined in red here. So it's mainly a retrospective application. So this application has been in a number of times before. So the main difference between previous applications and this application is the change in materials. So the photo you see before you is the proposal, which is the dormer to the front elevation and a dormer to both side elevations. As you can see, the photo is currently showing that the dormers have sort of grey, bluey cladding to the cheeks of the dormers. So this proposal is to remove that and to tile hang all of the dormers to match the existing roof tiles. So this is a view of the side dormer. So this dormer you can see here is of the greatest concern due to the size of it and the proximity to the eaves level. And then this is it further down the road, and you can see it again surrounding bungalows. So there are quite a few similar in terms of dormer extensions down the road, but this is considered to be particularly large in terms of the proximity to the eaves level. This again, you could just see the dormer in the distance there, and then this is from the other side. So the other side is a slightly smaller dormer set behind the main roof, but again you can see it's still currently clad, but again that is also proposed to be tile hung. So these were the existing elevations prior to any work taking place on the property. In 2017, the original application was submitted. The plans were amended in order to reduce the scale of the dormers, and this was the plan that was approved. So you can see on the right-hand side of this plan, the dormer is much reduced in scale, set down from the ridge line and set up quite considerably from the eaves level. The dormers were a similar size and were quite balanced on the property. And then this is the proposed. So whilst work had taken place, the dormer has been enlarged. I understand this may be linked to the internal staircase configuration, but it has resulted in a much larger dominant dormer. In terms of the size of it, it's 1.4 metres deeper than the previously approved dormer, making it 3.7 metres deep, and it's also 1.7 metres wider than the original dormer, resulting in a width of 7.5 metres. So this is the other side, so the one that's got the smaller dormers on it. So this was a previously approved plan again from 2017. And then this is what's been built. So we have less concerns with this side, given the fact that the dormer is still set up from the eaves level, and the dormers are much smaller in size, and there's a break between the dormers. So there's less concern with this side of the property. And then this was the other side, which has the greatest concern. So this was what was approved. So you can see the width of the dormer and how much it's set up from the eaves level. And then this is now what's been built. So it's wider, again, drop down to the eaves level. There's an extra window in that side elevation as well. And then this is the view from the rear elevation. So in terms of the history of this, the application was originally submitted in 2017. As mentioned, the dormers were amended and reduced in scale, and then that application was approved. The dormers were then built larger than the approved plans, and an application was then submitted for these dormers, and this has been refused. So this was refused due to the scale and the materials of the dormers. An enforcement notice was then served, which was appealed, but the inspector agreed with us, and this was upheld. Then a further application was submitted to us with very slight amendments, with reducing the roof lights in the roof slope and slightly changing the window design. This was refused by Planning Committee in 2020 due to the scale and form of that larger dormer and the colour and finish of the weatherboarding. This decision has then been appealed again, and through that appeal, amended plans were put forward with the tile hanging. So the inspector considered these dormers of this scale and the tile hanging through the appeal process, and the appeal was dismissed. So the inspector's view on the dormer was that the northeastern dormer is a large addition to the roof of the dwelling, and unlike the southwestern dormers, which are partially hidden from view, can clearly be seen from the road. It's not subservient in comparison to the size and simple pitch of the main roof, and by virtue of its position and size, the dormer is a visual dominant addition to the roof. And then in terms of the tile hanging that was proposed to replace the cladding, the inspector said that the use of tile hanging or an alternative colour for the cladding has been suggested, and whilst this may go some way to addressing the harm he's found, it would not address the scale and size of the northeastern dormer specifically, and therefore his conclusions on the main issue do not change. on the basis that the inspector has given a view on these dormers of this scale and of dormers with the tile hanging and considered it to be unacceptable, we have no option but to recommend the refusal of this application on the scale of the dormer within the northeast elevation. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. I move the opposite's recommendation is adopted. Could the Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman Cook. Members, does anybody wish to comment? Councillor Garner.
Thank you. I understand this is very difficult application. There's obviously quite a lot of history with it. And I can understand where the officers are coming from. But I do have a few concerns and a couple of questions that I'd like to ask about it. We've heard mention, and I've read in a number of the letters that have been submitted in support, that this isn't a one-off on this estate. There are a number of other similar dormers, and as was mentioned, one, I think 4 doors down at number 101, which is larger than this one. And in fact, if I remember rightly reading one of them, that, and I'll just read so as I'll get this right, that planning permission was granted for the dormer at number 101, and the delegated report actually made reference to this development in justification for that scheme. So while I can understand everything that's been said, I really think this is rather unfair that this one seems to be focused on and needing to be rejected, as when there are a number of others on the estate that have been approved. And I'd also just like to ask about the enforcement action and what actually that enforcement action would mean to this property if that was enacted.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Emma, can you come back on that regarding what enforcement would actually mean?
In terms of other properties in the road, yes, we've had a lot of applications over the years for extensions to the properties, and we've had lots of dormer applications submitted. I think the one that you're referring to specifically, 101 Botany Road, from what I understand from the officer that dealt with this application, that whilst that dormer was wider, it wasn't as low to the eaves level as this one. So I think the biggest concern with this is how deep it is projecting out from the side of the roof and how close to the eaves level it is. So I don't think that's an actual comparable application, because the dormer's different in size. But yes, I appreciate there are lots of other dormer extensions around here in this road, but I'm not sure if there's anything actually comparable to this size. And then in terms of the enforcement notice, I think Ian's just going to cover this point.
Thank you, yes. So a notice, as was previously served, would look to effectively state that for the application, for the I suppose the development, to be effectively changed to match what was approved, because obviously we have got an approval on this scheme previously, which would effectively form the process of serving a notice. Obviously, there would still be another opportunity to appeal that notice. If that notice was then upheld and then wasn't complied with, then it is something that's then reported, to the court. If it's not complied with, obviously, that would depend on a number of factors. But there's both an opportunity to appeal this application, but also an opportunity to appeal the enforcement notice as well, as has been done previously.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Garner.
Okay, so thank you. I understand that. I think one thing I'm considering here, and I think we maybe could all consider, is whether the scale of this dormer, is so totally inappropriate that it deserves, it's disproportionate to the scale of the infringement, the enforcement. I think we could consider that actually, although this may be slightly larger than it should be, It's similar to others on the estate, and some, as you said, might be wider than this. And I think to reject this proposal would be totally disproportionate to the action that would follow and the impact it would have on the family who live in this property. So 'cause I think we have to, as well as following guidelines, we have to have a little bit of compassion when we make these decisions.
Thank you, Councillor Garner, but I think, I'm not hard person, I think you know that. I do understand what you're getting at, but we are dealing with what, again, is in front of us this evening.
Sorry, I will just say, yeah, and all of that is in front of us this evening when we make this decision.
Right, members, thank you for that, Councillor Garner. Is there another member? Sorry, I'll get your name right this time, Councillor Hopkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I take the point about the fact that this dorm has been referred to in another planning application that was granted, that it's different. But I do feel a little uncomfortable in refusing permission on the basis that this has been referred to with another application. Can I just ask for a clarification, Mr. Livingstone, about the you probably did say this earlier, but just to check. So the idea would be, if this is refused, then for it to be amended to fit in with what has been approved. Was that approval granted retrospectively after the development, or was it granted before?
Thank you, Chair. It was, I believe it was granted before development occurred, and I think the Speaker outlined that obviously there was approval that was granted and it was then changed during construction, I believe. So yes, it would be, it would be to effectively, that's what the previous enforcement notices, I believe, sought to do as a change to accord with what was permitted.
Thank you. Councillor Grindon.
Just about. I confess I'm torn, but I do have one question. I know it's been said, but can you recap on what is recommended with the cladding, that is the rather grey cladding that is there at the moment, that's rather different to the rest of the property?
So it's proposed to remove the cladding completely on all three dormers and to replace it with tile hanging. So the tile hanging will basically be tiles to match in with the roof of the existing property. So it'll be the same colour tiles as you can see on the existing roof, and that will be just hung round all of the dormers.
I think Councillor Wright, no? Councillor Shonk.
Well, we do listen to our planning officers. Obviously they're the experts, but when you look at that dormer, the only thing that really sticks out is the colour. I think we've all got hearts, we do listen, believe it or not. And I think if that was if that cladding was taken off and had Kent peg tiles were the same, it wouldn't show as much. That's my thoughts on that. I mean, it's very difficult. I do take on board what the officers have said and approved before, but this is quite larger than that. But if you don't do it this one, there'd be a whole row down doing the same. They probably are anyway. So if that was just taken off and had Kent pegs or the same tiles, it wouldn't show up so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keane.
Thank you. Can you just tell me, are there some of the other bungalows in the area with the dormer extensions, have they also got cladding or are they tiled?
I think there probably are some. I don't have any examples, but there probably are some that have them.
Could I ask you, please, just a moment, please?
Yeah, just to confirm, there are examples of cladding in the area.
Thank you. I have other speakers. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I am familiar with Botany Road, and I have to say there are many extensions, and this one doesn't particularly look out of place any more than any other to me, but I understand that tonight we're considering this application alone. I think I agree with the comments that Councillor Shonk has made. It is the colour that stands out. How difficult would it be to change that, to make it more in keeping with the rest of the street, and would that satisfy the requirements, or would the bulk and scale still be an issue?
Thank you to Councillor Bayford. I'll come to Councillor Wright.
I'm going to be the bad guy here. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, if I lived next door, I would feel that I was crammed in. I think it's overbearing. I think it's too big. It's overbearing, and I'm not sure that to change the materials would make any difference. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Any other member wish to? Councillor Garner.
Yeah, just to clarify, this application actually does propose replacing the cladding on here to make it fit in. Yeah, so that is what. Yeah, so that's. I think
Yes,
that's what makes us happier. Yeah,
that can be. Can be. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chair. It's not just the cladding. We're going on about the cladding and the tiles. That's been sort of accepted. It's the size of it. The original planning application was not that size. That has been totally disregarded, and they've built something a lot bigger. Sure, it would be better with tiles, and that's agreed, but it's not the tiles, it's the size of it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cook, and that is correct. We are looking at the size, and obviously, which I'm sure you have your paperwork and so forth, as it's been explained about the appeal and so on. So, any other members? And I know it's a very difficult one for everyone. Councillor Patmore.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at it, it might be a little large. It might be not what it should be, but I'm sure that they would have learned their lesson by now. And I think we should show a little compassion and approve it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Moore. Yeah, I'm going to now. Righto, members. I think we've had quite a discussion and debate on that. I am going to put this to the vote, which, as you know, is the officer's recommendation is refusal. You know the grounds for that. So those in favour of the refusal, please show their hands. Those against? Abstentions? Right, that has failed. Come to Mr. Livingston.
So members have outlined in the debate and that some members consider that the change in materials is considered sufficient to mean that the development in terms of its current scale would be in keeping with the character and appearance of the area. And therefore, if a member was to propose to approve the application as submitted, they just need to state those reasons, to give reasons for approval to be recorded.
Right, Councillor Garner, you wish to comment? Propose, yes?
I don't wish to comment. I wish to propose.
That's fine.
Along the lines as outlined by Mr. Livingstone, that this application be approved.
Thank you. A second. We have a seconder. Councillor Crenton. Okay. Yes, Ian will come back on that. I will put it to the vote.
Just to clarify, if Councillor Garner was so minded and the seconder, who I assume James has recorded, was also minded, it will be requested that there was a condition that the materials were to match the tiles of the existing roof slope, but that's entirely for the council to decide.
Yes, I am so minded.
Thank you for that, Councillor Garner. Thank you for that, Councillor Crinden. That's been seconded. Members, those in favour of what you've heard there, please show of hands. Councillor Garner, I'll come to you because you pre-proposed it and get the words right.
I'm, I'm proposing what Mr Livingston said, that we're approving this on the condition that the tiles that replace the cladding are the same as the roof.
Thank you. Councillor Keane, I will come to you. I know we've had a vote.
Thank you. I mean, just a point here. I would like to propose that we just approve it as is. So where does that go with voting?
So obviously the motion has been put forward first. I think just as a point of clarification before that motion is voted on, the application is proposing to change the tiles. So that is what is being considered. So the consideration of leaving it as it is not under consideration this evening.
Councillor Patmore.
Sorry, Chair. If the colour is all wrong, why do they have to go to the expense of putting tiles on? Why can't they just paint it brown?
I think, Councillor Moore, I mean, that's not for us to decide this evening. I can understand again where you're coming from, but we can't.
But I thought we've decided that they must have tiles.
Yes, we have, but we can't say what colour and so forth. They can't do that here.
It'd be better painted.
Whatever. No, I know your feelings. I say we are human, so okay. You're fine. Thank you. I think we finished on that one. Yes, we'll have a vote on what's been proposed. Please. No. Mr. Livingston will do it.
So the motion is to approve the application as the change in materials is considered sufficient to mean the development will be in keeping with the character and appearance of the area, subject to a condition requiring the roof tiles, the tiles to match the existing roof tiles.
Understand? Okay. I think that is fair. So please show of hands if you agree. Are those against? Abstentions? That has been carried. And thank you. I take it that some members of the public will be leaving us. I'll just give a few moments for you to depart. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We get back to our business tonight with the agenda, which is agenda item 5F. WS Cole and Son, 116 Monkton Street, Monkton, Ramsgate. And on this point, I have to ask Councillor Shonk to leave the meeting. Councillor? As you may gather, Councillor Shonk earlier indicated he had an interest and knows the Cole family and so on. Thank you. Speaking in favour of the application is Mr. Payne. Do we have Mr. Payne? Sorry, we've kept you waiting a little while tonight, Mr. Payne, but you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name's Stuart Payne. I'm from Happer Architects. We're the architects of the Coles Yard proposal. We're proposing to create a new mixed housing and retirement flats development on the existing brownfield site to the rear of 116 Monkton Street. The site has been identified in the local plan as being a residential development site, and our clients wanted to use this designation to help residents to stay in the area rather than being priced out by larger, more commercially minded housing developments. Our clients, the Coles, have lived in the village for several generations and are valued members of the community. The principle of development is to allow for a mixed variety of housing types and sizes designed for people of all ages, from starter homes to family homes through to retirement flats. This will help to create an inclusive community feel and cater for local residents who still want to stay in the area when retiring, or younger families wanting to buy their first home. We've undertaken extensive research in the area and hosted community consultation meetings to discuss the various options and to find out what the local residents want on the land. We collected questionnaires and spoke to local residents and those in the local area at length about their concerns with the increased number of developments in the village. The aim was to create a well-rounded proposal for the local community that they could be proud of. The proposal also allows for a village shop to further serve the community. The land has been designed to have affordable housing, starter homes towards the front of the site, family homes and disabled accessible dwellings in the centre, and purpose-built residential retirement flats at the south end of the site. The development is landscaped to allow for trees, native bushes and wildflower plant beds to help soften the landscape, and the retirement flats surround an enclosed garden with ponds and planting. We have made every effort to keep as many trees as possible and have included for additional planting to help screen the site and mitigate local residents' concerns. There have been some comments from residents of Seamark Close, which we have made a priority to address. We feel that lowering the height of the retirement flats, redesigning the first floor to alleviate overlooking concerns, and reducing the houses which back onto this road to a story-and-a-half height. We hope they've helped to mitigate these worries. All outstanding concerns regarding ecology, arboricultural, drainage, archaeology, transport, etc. have been resolved, and the proposal has the support of the council, the parish council, local councillors and many of the public. So we therefore request planning permission be granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Raising points of concern is Mr. Smith. If you're there, you have 3 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, committee. Mr. Payne just mentioned that there was support for the scheme among local people. This reference is a result of a consultation that took place in 2019 with purely aspirational ideas of what was actually going to be proposed for the site. Now that we've seen some of the detail, that support has gone away. We've done 2 paper-based surveys and 1 online community survey. Of those people that expressed a preference, 90% of the local people are against this development. We have 76 against with 7 in support. One of those 7 in support actually admitted they clicked the wrong button on the Facebook page. The houses on the west of the site will back directly onto the existing homes in Seamark Close and will be 7.8 metres high. The gardens of the proposed new homes appear to be quite small, around 10 metres onto number 5 Seamark Close, is just 6 metres on number 12. The existing homes on the eastern side of Seamark Close that will be overlooked are predominantly bungalows at 4.9 metres from the back garden fence of number 15 Seamark Close. This again is a bungalow, and will be dwarfed by a 2-storey block of flats. The council's planning application, the local plan sets out that the plans will be set out that policies and proposals will be used to guide decisions on investments and development in regeneration up to 2031. Yet the council officers appear to be telling you already that your local plan that is that's just about a year old is already out of date and we should override it. The plan states very clearly 2 places for development in Monkton. One is Waters Hill Farm, which is already underway for 20 properties as set out in the local plan, and the other is this Coles Yard development. Again, the local plan says 20 properties, not 37 that is currently proposed. We urge the committee to do what it says in the local plan, use that to guide your decision making, and we conclude by saying the development is not wanted by local people, despite what's been said. It is too tall, it is too close and too dense, and it is against the council's current local plan. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Also raising points of concern is Miss Smith.
Yes, no relation. I might
Right,
say.
thank you.
No relation.
Thank you.
Just good friends.
Yeah. Right. Local residents asked council officers and councillors on the planning committee to visit the Coles Yard site in November 2020, when the sheer scale of this proposed development and the impact it would have on existing homes and the village as a whole became clear. We were told at the time that no such visits were taking place due to the COVID pandemic. We understand that site visits can now take place again. We believed, and still do, that if the impact the development will have on the existing properties in Seamark Close was to be seen by those determining this application, they would have a far better understanding of the reasons for the strong objections among local people. Various new developments are already underway in the village, and if this application for another 37 homes were to be approved, the village will grow by almost a third in just 4 years. Another application is to be considered by the planning committee this evening that actually shares a boundary with the Coles Yard development. It's known as the Hay Hill site and is next on your agenda. The Hay Hill development is seeking permission for another 49 homes. If this too gets approved, a total of 86 new homes will be imposed on the village that is made up of around 250 homes in a single night. This is a number that is utterly unreasonable and incredibly unfair. The plans for the Coles Yard development, as drawn to date, simply do not show sufficient detail in terms of the impact that the new buildings would have on the existing homes, particularly those in Seamark Close. We note that building appearance and final heights are to be reserved matters, but fear that once the outline application is approved, local people will no longer have a chance to object to these details. We still believe the planning committee and planning officers would benefit from a site visit to ensure they have a full grasp of the proposals before coming to a decision. We urge the committee to reserve judgment on both the Coles Yard and Hay Hill applications until a site visit can be arranged. Both applications have been in existence for more than a year, so surely delaying the decision by a few more weeks to allow a site visit to take place is not unreasonable. Council officers and planning committee members should visit the village to see for themselves the impact of both applications. At least having done so, you will have the knowledge and understanding of the various issues with these developments that will allow you to make an informed opinion. 86 new homes in a village of just 250 is a massive change. Surely such huge change deserves to be assessed on the ground, so to speak, before a decision is reached. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Speaking on behalf of the Monkton Parish Council is Parish Councillor Brown.
Good evening, members. I'm speaking with something of a croaky voice tonight as Chairman of Monkton Parish Council, and we're in favour of Officer's recommendation to approve this application. The application did indeed earn wide support with villagers at the initial consultation stage. We were pleased to see the plans were addressing a recognised housing need in the village, with the proposal to build retirement homes for older residents and starter homes for younger families, and young people. By contrast, almost all recent development in Monkton has been in the form of 4 to 5 bedroom executive properties, which clearly does not meet village need. The Parish Council wish to acknowledge the fact that concerns have been raised about this development, and indeed they have been raised this evening. In particular, I want to mention those raised by the residents of Seamark Close who adjoin the development site, and many other villagers concerned about the impact of further development in the village. The Parish Council has tried extremely hard to balance these concerns with the fact that the site is allocated for development, plus the fact the architects have gone to some considerable length to mitigate the impact on Seamark Close developments by reduced height buildings and generous separation from their properties. This consideration as a parish council has been pleasing and refreshing to see, as is the fact there are no highways alterations also associated with this application. On a separate note, as a village, we have barely any facilities or services. The proposal, therefore, to reintroduce a village shop as part of the development is viewed extremely positively. In summary, this is a brownfield site and it is identified for development in the local plan. The proposed plans meet guidelines and address a genuine housing need in the village. Taking all of the above into account, on balance, the Parish Council view this as a good development for the village and therefore support the recommendation to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. I'll ask now the planning officers to outline the report. And Ian, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The application is for the erection of 19 dwellings and 18 retirement flats. So the application is, it also includes a enlargement of an existing single-storey building to form a retail unit. So it is an outline application, but a lot of the matters are before members this evening. The only matters that are being reserved until a later date and submission is the actual detailed appearance of the properties, but there are some indicative plans showing the appearance which members will see. So this is the local plan map which shows the allocation of the site. As already outlined, the site was given an indicative 20 units as part of the work through the local plan to indicate the numbers proposed. So it is an allocated housing site. The site is a series of storage and workshop buildings accessed from Monkton Street. So looking at an aerial view of the village, you can see Seamark Close, which is here, stretching from the top to the bottom of the image, which is to the west of the application site. You can see as well, just down the bottom here, the edge of Monkton's recreation ground and the pavilion, which is where the mouse pointer is at the bottom of the screen. And you can see the track that runs all the way through the application site. Just looking at it in a little bit more detail, you can see there's a collection of buildings around the existing vehicular access and then a series of workshop buildings behind. And we're just going to go through some images going through the site and then looking back towards those buildings. So this is that access to the site. So on the left-hand side you have a dwelling which isn't part of this application, which we'll see in detail in the next image. You can see an existing two-storey workshop building behind the van here, which is proposed to be demolished as part of the scheme. You then have this garden area, which is going to form part of a parking area next to the village hall, which is on the right-hand side of the image. So this is the property that's outside the application site and not proposed for anything to happen to on the left of the access. Then behind the cars there is the garden area, and you can see the village hall on the right hand side. There is also this property here, which is a two-storey property with a pitched roof, which is also outside of the application site, so there's nothing proposed to happen to that property. And so this is just a view down further down Monkton Street, where you can see the front of the village hall. So this is opposite the site, which is the school, and then this is moving inside the site. So this on the left-hand side, you can see the two-storey building to be demolished. So you can see the access runs through a sort of narrow point where there is landscaping on one side and on others. So there is some landscaping that's being lost as part of this development to accommodate the road and link in to the site. Turning to the right of the image that we're looking at there, shows the side elevation of that two-storey property that's not part of the application site. This area in front of this property is part of the application site and would form part of the road, which we'll look at when we're looking at the proposed layout. On the left-hand side, you've got a single-storey building which is to be demolished. Behind the fence is the location of the storage building, which is to be enlarged for a single-storey flat-roofed retail unit. So then this is a view looking back towards the primary school, which is opposite. So you can see the building on the right now, which is the two-storey building to be demolished. And then turning back around and going further into the site, you can see that some of the landscaping that's going to be removed on the right-hand side here, and you can see a sort of high single-storey workshop building on the left-hand side of the image, which is to be demolished. And then going further into the site around the corner, this is the corner on the left-hand side of that building. You see you've got a number of structures here on the site, all of which are to be cleared. And then this is looking back towards the extent of the built mass at the moment, back to that two-storey warehouse building. This is even further back into the site, which obviously, as you can see, forms a builder's yard and open storage. Then this is back further into the site. So you can see that there is landscaping both within the site and also on the boundaries of the site either side. You can see in the centre of the image a tree which is actually outside the application site, which I'll point out on the site plan as well, which is one of the more dominant trees in the middle of the site, or adjacent to the middle of the site. And then this is a view looking back towards the back of the site. There is a lot of land that's overgrown towards the back of the site, but we'll look at the plans showing the proposed landscaping so you can see what's happening with the different trees. So I'm going to show some views from Seamark Close now, so to show the character of that road and the existing relationship looking over towards the site. So this is looking at properties as you start to go down Seamark Close. So you have a mixture of types of bungalows. So you've got the I won't use the term chalet bungalow again. You've got a bungalow with front dormer windows in that are semi-detached. But then as you go further down the road, you get into pitched roof bungalows without those roof additions, and then a change in design as you get to the end of that cul-de-sac with the bungalows that you can see here. So in the background here, you can see some trees which are at the back of the application site, and again, we'll point these out on the site plans when looking at them. So this is the form of the proposal. And because of the nature of the plan, we've split this down into two. So we'll start by looking at the front of the site. So as mentioned, at the front of the site in that garden area, you have 7 parking spaces to be created for visitors to either the village hall or indeed to the shop for use. So they're for general use, with a new and re-tarmac vehicular access through the site. Immediately where the location of the 2-storey workshop building was that we looked at in the photos, is proposed to have a row of 2-storey terrace properties, four of those terrace properties opposite the single-storey shop. Then as you move through the site, we have a variety of scale of properties which we'll look at in the next plan, but you can see that what's being proposed is a very linear street pattern with semi-detached properties as you go through, and then some detached properties to the eastern extent of the road at the bottom of the image here. And then down at the bottom you have the retirement units development of 18 units with a turning head as well, with 28 parking spaces to serve those flats. You can also see the pavilion that we mentioned earlier with those existing trees, which are the ones with the black lines within them, which are the existing ones to be retained. We'll talk a bit more about the landscaping, but the trees that you can see that don't have those indented black lines are proposed trees rather than those trees to be retained. So looking at the scale of development, because that is something that members are considering this evening, this has been amended through the course of the application. And so what you have, if we look at the right hand side image, you have detached 2-storey properties as type B, those 4 terrace properties where the existing 2-storey workshop is, but set slightly back. You have a single-storey flat roof retail unit. You then move into what's denoted here as type E, which is in green, and these are they are single-storey buildings with rooms in the roof with front and rear dormer windows. So they could be classed as 2-storey dwellings, but they certainly have first-floor accommodation. So that's something we'll look at in terms of the relationship with the neighbouring properties. So they have changed from 2-storey properties originally submitted. So you've got a collection of those, which are the ones in green. Then type D, which is the ones in red, are the full 2-storey properties. They're the detached units. And then the retirement flats to the south of the site. So this is a 2-storey building, so it's got a bigger pitch, but again, it has dormer windows or larger dormer windows in that roof space. So it's 2-storey, but with rooms in the roof, but with larger dormers that we'll see. So looking at some long sections, again, these are indicative plans. The detailed appearance would be subject to a separate application, but this gives you an idea of the scale of the building. So if we take the if we take the top image, on the left-hand side, you can see that building to be retained that was right on the junction and access to the site. So you can see that the design of that block of 4 terrace properties are matching the eaves height and the ridge height of that existing building at the front of the site. And then in the middle image, you can see the scale and indicative design of the single-storey building with dormer windows front and back, which we'll look at in a bit more detail. And then there are the detached buildings, which are obviously on the eastern side of that access. So that's on the right-hand side of that middle section. And then at the bottom, you have the elevation showing the scale of the retirement units. So again, you can see there that you've got first-floor accommodation, not quite dormer windows, but they're more significant in scale. And then actually on the bottom image, you can see on the right-hand side there the pavilion. So you can see there's a change in level to where they got the pavilion, which is obviously to the south of the site. So this is just a bit of a detailed view of the proposed units, which really form the majority of the houses in the development. So the detailed materials and design of this would be fixed at reserve matter stage. However, these are indicative plans. So if this was to be submitted, it well could be that this is submitted, because obviously we are still looking at the scale, and the scale is defined by the height to the eaves and the height in the roof space, and indeed that ridge height. So that is what members are considering this evening. So in terms of that relationship with properties on Seamark Close, as mentioned, all of the properties on the western side are that single storey with dormer windows front and back in the roof. You can see that there is a distance between the bungalows in Seamark Close, and that relationship is one that obviously officers did consider was quite important to reduce the scale of the buildings that were proposed. So there are still going to be first floor windows proposed facing towards Seamark Close. The distance has been considered to be sufficient back to back, so we're looking at 31 metres back to back. And we do think, because of the scale of those units and the fact that they are pitching away with dormer windows, we don't consider, given that distance, that there would be a sense of enclosure or indeed loss of light to those properties, given that minimum of 31 metres distance. In terms of the retirement flats to the south, there is a tightening of the properties on Seamark Close to this site. As you can see, it's got closer, and therefore this has been looked at in terms of whether or not amendments were necessary, and in this instance they were, on the basis that the windows would have resulted, in our view, of overlooking to the rear of that adjacent property on Seamark Close, and therefore both a condition and indeed the plans have been submitted to confirm that the first floor windows on the western flank of that building would be obscure glazed up to 1.7 metres in height above finished floor level, and that is echoed and showed by the floor plans, which indicate that there's only one unit, it's one unit, but with two different rooms, which would have that 1.7 metre obscure glazing. The rest of the windows in that flank are serving hallways, so that they're not going to result in overlooking either. So just to again confirm that sort of roof design and the scale of that building for the retirement flats, and then just to confirm, here's a confirmation of the section showing the 1.7 metres that would be required in terms of the obscurity of those windows. So to talk about transportation, there are 80 spaces in total proposed in this application to serve the development. So every dwelling has 2 off-street spaces that would be provided, and as mentioned earlier, the retirement flats have 28 parking spaces. There's also parking for the ambulance directly in front, or an ambulance directly in front of the retirement flats. And there's also turning facilities that have been provided for any delivery vehicles serving the retail unit, as well as some visitor parking spaces and some parking spaces opposite the retail unit for that, as well as those mentioned spaces at the front of the site, of which there are 7 which are for general use. In terms of the access to the site, so this is a key issue. Obviously, it is an existing access, and it does serve obviously builders' yard vehicles. But what has been looked at here, as you can see in the bottom left of the image, is tracking showing ambulances, longer vehicles, to be able to access and turn in and out of the site. One thing that does mean is that the bus stop is being relocated to 5 metres to the west of the existing location, to ensure that there isn't any conflict between if a bus was parked and any vehicles turning out to the west on the left-hand side of the image. KCC have looked at this access and do consider that it is sufficient on a safety purpose for safety purposes. In terms of landscaping, so this has been looked at in with a bit of back and forth and quite a bit of detail. So as mentioned, the trees that have the I suppose black lines within them, within those green circles, are the trees to be retained. There are trees within the site that are to be lost as part of the proposal. It is considered that the allocation of the site would have resulted in the loss of trees here, and that the vast majority of trees that result in the most both screening to residents of adjacent properties and also amenity value of within the development are being retained on the either side boundary. It is proposed for trees to be planted along the actual road as well, which obviously, as members will know from the training, is a requirement of the MPPF changes. They're proposed to be field maple trees. We are putting a condition on that would request some additional landscaping details by virtue of the fact that there's a native hedgerow mix that's being proposed, but we've asked for sort of some additional details of that. But we are comfortable with the balance between retaining the trees on the site and those to be lost. If we go to the south of the site, there has been some additional work that's been done through the application. One of the reasons why it's taken so long to get to members is because KCC Ecology, when looking at the preliminary ecological appraisal that was done, have requested additional information and indeed requested additional surveys for bats and reptiles, which were undertaken earlier this year. And what that has resulted in is some specific mitigation that's required to be accorded with, which would involve the translocation of any reptiles that are found during the course of development to the south of the site. So you can see a pink line which is dotted, which shows the receptor site around the edge where there's going to be a landscape buffer with from the retirement flats to the pavilion. You've also got the inclusion of bat boxes and bat bricks and bird bricks to ensure for the new build houses, as well as some roosting space in the roof space of the flats. They have gone back to KCC as mitigation, and it is considered that's sufficient to ensure that there's no loss of biodiversity from this site. And given the increase in tree cover that would be proposed through the landscaping, it is considered to be of benefit in terms of biodiversity and ecology. In terms of air quality, there is the proviso of 1 electric vehicle charging space per house and 1 in 10 for communal spaces for the flats. Surface water drainage has also been looked at. It's been assessed specifically by KCC. There is a specific condition which has been requested by them for the detailed surface water drainage to be looked at, predominantly in relation to ensuring that the infiltration rates that have been put forward in the strategy are accorded with, which is a standard condition for a development of this scale, to ensure that infiltration rates are sufficient so there is not runoff outside of the site to cause surface water flooding issues. In terms of planning obligations, the heads of terms are outlined in the report. It outlines 30% affordable housing. That includes the retirement flats. So that's 6 houses and 5 flats. There is also a number of other contributions which have been assessed to be in accordance with the Regulation 122, including education contributions, contribution towards the CCG, and also the SAMS contribution that members will be familiar with. In terms of the impact on the area in relation to the allocation of the site. So the principle of development has been agreed through the local plan for housing. The numbers that are provided as part of the local plan are the ones that are taken forward when calculating the council's 5-year housing land supply. That does not mean that applications that are submitted which are for more or indeed less shouldn't be considered, and therefore need to be considered by members in terms of whether or not the development would have an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the area, or the impact on the countryside, or on the impact, in this instance, of the landscape character area. In our opinion, by virtue of the scale of buildings that's been provided and would be limited by virtue of an outline approval, it is considered that this development would not result in harm to the landscape character area. It is considered to be spacious enough to avoid any impact on the countryside. And when added into the particular contributions, the 30% affordable housing, it is considered that, as well as the provision of a shop within the development, which accords with a specific policy, E13, which relates to retail developments that serve villages, it is considered that the application is acceptable, and therefore the application is deferred and delegated, the recommendation is to defer and delegate the application for approval to officers to secure the legal agreement, which would secure those planning obligations, and subject to the conditions outlined. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Ian. I move the officer's recommendation is adopted. Could the Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman Cook. Members. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, this has been allocated for housing in the local plan. It's a brownfield site. I consider it's a sensitive development. The scale's been amended. Consideration has been given to overlooking with obscure windows on one side. The landscaping has been is generous. It's a spacious development. We have affordable housing and contributions to be made. In my view, I have no doubt about about going along with the officer's recommendation to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, I've had a good read of this report before coming along today. So I've just got a couple of questions that I'd like to ask. One about Southern Water's comments in the report. They mention about designing off-site sewage network reinforcements that are required before this would be able to go ahead, I believe is what it's suggesting. And they're talking about limiting timescales to 24 months from a firm commitment of the development. So I'd like to fully understand what that means, really, before I go on and make further comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Ian.
So Southern Water obviously have raised the issues of, as you say, the need for reinforcements, and this is something that does obviously come up quite a lot with regards to major developments of this sort of scale. So there is a condition which requires that no development shall take place until foul water drainage arrangements are submitted to us and obviously agreed in writing. As part of any submissions of conditions details for drainage to do with foul water, we would consult with Southern Water. Now, under the Water and Infrastructure Act, Southern Water are required to agree a connection to the drainage network, but what they can require before any agreement for any drainage to connect is actually reinforcement works to the existing capacity, which effectively the developer would have to pay to agree with them before the development could connect to the network. So in this instance, by virtue of the condition safeguarding that the drainage arrangements would be sorted out prior to development actually taking place, it is considered that the development wouldn't result in any issue with regards to capacity to existing residents without the improvement works that Southern Water require occurring. Thank you.
Good. Councillor Garner?
Yeah, okay, I understand that. I mean, I guess it could be argued that Southern Water require quite a significant amount of work to their existing network to make it fit for purpose before any further development, including this, is permitted, because they don't seem to be able to cope with what we've currently got without discharging profuse amounts of sewage into the sea on regular occasions. But I understand that's a little bit separate to this. There were one or two comments in different sections that caused some concern around flood potential on the site. KCC Flood Water Management mentioned that they have concerns, and they're utilising a strategy, or they're proposing the implementation of a strategy utilising permeable pavements that would lead to soakaways to control or try to control potential flooding as far as they're concerned. KCC Highways also mentioned that provision for measures to prevent discharge of surface water onto the highway. I think it sort of paints a picture that there is obviously a potential for flooding on this site, and I sort of like to assume that might be one of the reasons why, although this site is a brownfield site and was chosen, that the local plan limited it to 20 units rather than the now 37 that are proposed. And so I do have a concern that maybe we're again sort of overcrowding a site and not implementing or not having adequate measures to deal with potential flooding on the site. So I think that's another maybe question that you might be able to answer.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of surface water drainage, any application that's over 10 units or basically a new housing development, we consult with KCC as the local lead flood authority, and they obviously look at sustainable drainage systems. And obviously in this instance, what was put forward in the strategy included permeable paving for this site. Every application site of this sort of scale would require a surface water drainage strategy, which will include looking at measures to basically make sure that surface water flooding on hard surfaces is ameliorated by virtue of slowing down the rate of discharge, in this instance through permeable paving. The KCC's specific comment relates to the need for a detailed scheme to come in, again, prior to development commencing on the site, to look at ensuring that infiltration rates, and basically needing a ground investigation report to make sure the infiltration rates would be acceptable. In terms of the capacity of the site, I cannot speak in detail to the rationale behind the 20 units that's given, but fundamentally that is often on a character and appearance basis, but will also take in consultee views with regards to what's going on. That would include people such as highways and other elements of KCC, but fundamentally KCC as the local lead flood authority have not objected to development and are in agreement with a condition requiring those submission of details in. And again, it's a Grampian condition, which means if it's not satisfied, then the development can't take place. So I think that's an important point in terms of whether or not the condition is sufficient to mitigate the impact, which in our view, with the wording, it certainly is considered to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian.
Can I just come back with, got one more query or comment to make, if you don't mind? Yeah. My final comment, I think, was sort of relates to what was raised by a couple of the residents who spoke. I know we have to deal with each application as we see it, separate. But of course we know that once we've dealt with this application, we've got another application to consider following this that is on the site next door. So I've got a concern that the local plan states that this site, which is the only site in the village that is being considered here for 20 units, and obviously I understand the move up to 37, but then we're going to be considering in isolation, separate to this, that the site next door is going to have a few more, I think, and as was mentioned, making a total of 86 units, which is going to have quite a significant impact on the village. I bet quite a big change, and also quite a big impact on the land that does enable the area to cope with heavy rainfall and potential flooding. So I can understand the suggestion that it might be a good idea for if we were able to go and actually have a look at the both of them, and then come back and consider them both after assessing the impact after going to see it and the impact on the village. I don't really know what the answer is about not being able to consider them both at the same time.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. I know I understand. Ian, come back.
So obviously the application that's in front of you now is all could be considered in light of what has happened in this vote, because it's happened if one of those come to it. But obviously it's really important for members in terms of what the consultees have said with regards to impact on infrastructure, that it's actually the predominant principle of developments such as this have to look at whether or not the development washes its own face effectively through both drainage, other infrastructure, highway movements, new accesses, etc. And so that's why obviously each situation is looked at in that way, because obviously if that's the case, then each development would be able to be accorded sufficient capacity and infrastructure purposes. So this application is all that's being considered obviously now, as you say, Councillor Garner, just to clarify that point. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ian. Councillor Grindon.
Thank you. Observation really on a lot has been said about the number of properties in the local plan compared to the number of dwelling units here. But if it wasn't for the fact that an awful lot of those dwelling units are lumped together into a retirement block, the difference in the numbers between the local plan and if it was just houses probably aren't quite so great. So I'm not seeing that as a major issue. And I'm hoping for some reassurance going forward that when the parking is done, that is sympathetic for drainage. You talked about permeable pavements, but so often we don't see that. So I realise that would be part of the delegate thing. But those are just two comments, really.
Thank you, Councillor Grindon. I think that has been noted. Thank you. Any other? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm torn with this one. Part of me says yes, part of me says no, but having heard that originally in 2020 there was a site visit arranged that had to be postponed, I think I'd be happier if we could recommend that we had a site visit. Thank you.
I'll come back to you after we debate this, Ian.
Just to confirm, in terms of a site visit being postponed, obviously, I don't know the details of the issue. Obviously, the site has been visited by officers in terms of inside the site to look at the impact on the residential properties adjacent, as well as obviously the impact on the actual site itself. And obviously, we've talked a bit about the trees, as well as looking at the environment around there. So the site has been visited, just to confirm that.
But not by members.
That may be true, Councillor Wright. Councillor Paulmore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You'll be glad to know that most of my points have been covered by the members. I'd just like to ask, the new highway that's being proposed, is that going to be adopted by KCC? And also, what provision have we got for hydrants in that location?
Thank you, Chair. I don't believe that the proposal would adopt that highway. I will just I'll come back to you if that's okay, just to check that, because I believe that KCC could still potentially adopt that highway, but I don't believe that's been put forward by the developer in this instance.
Come back, please.
So in that sense, then it would be a private road with private hydrants, possibly.
Yeah, that would be the case, Councillor Moore, and I think you know a little bit about that sort of thing. So, any other members wish to comment? Okay, I'm going to put this to the vote with yourselves. Those in favour, please show the hand, please. Yes. Those against? Abstentions? Sorry, can we go through that? Sorry, Pat, you had your arm in the air for both. Which, is it stuck? I know it's getting late. Can we do, members, if you don't mind, if we could do that again. Those for this application, please show. That took a while.
Got that, thank you.
Okay. Those against? Abstentions? That has been carried. Thank you very much, members. I don't know where anybody wants to go and find Councillor Shonk. I think it's raining outside. Sounds like it.
Mr. Chairman, I think the next application applies as well.
No, I don't know. No,
Okay.
no, it doesn't. Yes. I'll just wait for Councillor Shonk to come back in. Thank you, members. Members of the public, thank you, Councillor Shonk. I don't know if you had to run around the park with the weather as it is at the moment. No. Right, agenda item 5G, which is the plan application for approval for land rear of 92 and 102 Monkton Street, Monkton. Speaking in favour of this application is Mr. Coward, if Mr. Coward is with us.
Good evening, yes.
Thank you, and again, sorry for keeping you quite some time this evening, but you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, I'm the agent for the application. We welcome the detailed officer's report and of course the recommendation to approve. I want to focus on one point, namely the principle of this development on the site with regard to the MPPF. This will explain why exactly the same scheme has been submitted relatively soon after the December 2020 appeal decision. I know that a number of the representations have mentioned this. With the last appeal, the tilted balance did not apply. Now it does, as the most recent housing delivery test results confirm that the authority have only delivered 54% of the houses needed. Any figure below the threshold of 75%, which is classified as being substantially below the figure that it should be, triggers a tilted balance. I'm sure you're all familiar with it now, but the tilted balance confirms the presumption in favour of sustainable development, and the MPPF is very clear that planning permission should be granted unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So that's the way why it's called the tilted balance, in that you need to demonstrate significant and demonstrable harm. And this is the key policy matter at the heart of this application. The benefits of 49 new homes set against a housing shortfall to include 30% affordable homes where there is a need. The inspector in the last appeal concluded that the scheme would deliver notable benefits. So we now then need to consider what the inspector concluded in respect of harm. He had no issue with the impact of the scheme upon the character and appearance of the area, and he concluded no material landscape impact. As of course members are aware, the scheme is surrounded on 3.5 sides by existing built form. There was no issue with the loss of best and most versatile agricultural land, and this issue was not on its own sufficient to withhold planning permission. As members are aware, the site is boxed in on all sides, it's isolated from the rest of the agricultural holding, it's not been farmed since 2016, and there's real issue with the proximity to residential properties arising from, say, harvest dust and the risk of pesticide spray drift. The inspector did, however, of course, conclude that the scheme was contrary to the development plan, specifically those policies which require development to be within settlement limits, whereas, of course, whilst we're well related to the settlement, we're outside of it. But this matter is now addressed by the tilted balance, which did not apply with the last appeal. This is the fundamental change from the last appeal, and this key policy issue was not in play previously, whereas it is now. The scheme has gone through the appeal system, and the only harm to sufficient to justify a refusal of planning permission has now been addressed with this very clear change in circumstances. This is why the scheme is back with you, this is where we are, and this of course is why you've got a recommendation before you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Coward. Raising points of concern is Mrs. Johnson. Mrs. Johnson, 3 minutes.
We obviously don't agree with the reasons given. We don't agree that the tilted balance has anything to do with this at all. For a very small village, there have been a large number of objections from residents. I'm not going to go through them because it's the second time you've seen them and they have not changed. In addition to these objections, I've got some questions. Why are there policies in place, such as a site being not within the village confines and therefore within the countryside, in order to protect the countryside, if these policies can be overturned almost on a whim? Why, if a piece of agricultural land is not within the local plan, when the local plan is now ratified, should it even be considered for building on? How can building on yet another piece of agricultural land be helping towards the aim of a greener county and helping to counteract the climate emergency, an aim which we understand the Council has signed up to and now also has the support of the Prime Minister? How can continuing to build a car-dependent housing help towards the above aim? Moncton is most definitely a car-dependent community. On what premise is built the idea that adding pressure to already overstretched facilities can help to sustain them? Moncton is not a sustainable village. If the officer's report needs to justify the conclusion, which appears to show why the development should not take place, then surely the conclusion is right and not the justification. Although the unwanted and fiercely opposed road scheme, which hasn't been mentioned, which would need to be imposed on our village in order for this development to take place, has been agreed by Kent Highways, something we are at a total loss to understand, how can it be right that this road scheme will result in the waiting area for traffic being nearer to our village school? The impact of air pollution from traffic fumes on young children is increasingly being understood, and this would be completely against current thinking if it went ahead. With regard to this application, we find it hard to accept that objections to planning applications are taken into account. Whilst we do agree that there are housing issues in Thanet, Building 49, mostly executive-type houses in a field in Moncton, is extremely unlikely to help the real issues of homelessness for Thanet residents, however quickly or otherwise they are built, and whatever agreements have now been made. We feel the original decision was totally right, and this was confirmed by the upholding of it by the inspector, who did note that the tilted balance existed but ignored it, and in one of his conclusions noted, and I quote, "It has not been demonstrated that the development is essential for the economic or social well-being of the area, and thus the proposal conflicts with LP policy SP 26, and this is not the only policy it conflicts with." We do not agree that there is anything either in this resubmission or in the officer's report which challenges the original decision in any way or gives any grounds for changing it now, and we would therefore urge you to help protect our village and refuse this application which continues to conflict with the council's own policies.
Thank you, Mrs Johnson. Also raising points of concern is Mr Annett. Mr Annett?
Put the record straight. Everybody keeps saying it's 96 to 102. I actually live at 106 and it affects me greatly. There's also 104, 108 and a fair few other houses that it actually affects, so it's not 96 to 102. And it's been that since it's actually been put the application in. It affects a lot of static homes in Foxhunter Park because they all overlook this field. And it also affects 22 houses that are opposite this by the time you get to the school, and that isn't taking into account the proposed double yellow lines that are going to be put in. Tilted balance is a reason this has been put and resubmitted again for the same layout as it was before. Policy SPO1 states primary focus for new housing is the district's urban area and limited development of the village of Monkton as defined by the local plan. Monkton is therefore clearly within the countryside for the purpose of planning policy and has already had more than that limited development. Local plan policy SP26 seeks to conserve and enhance Thanet's landscape character and local distinctiveness. The proposed site is in the Stour Marshes landscape character area, and the policy says the development should be directed away from the Stour Marshes, as this is one of the district's areas which is largely undeveloped and key to retaining the island character of Thanet. Hay Hill are suggesting that Thanet District Council cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites with the appropriate buffer, and when the application was refused it did not have a local plan. However, this is not now the case as it has an adopted plan now. What is the tilted balance? The NPPF, National Policy Planning Framework 2019, states you must have a clear reason for refusal of planning permission. As long as you have a clear reason for refusal, which you have and have demonstrated by refusing the application previously, then you are correct in refusing the application again. The planning inspector also agreed with Thanet Council Planning Committee and rejected the application on appeal, stating that it was not within the confines of the local plan or should be developed due to the need of the agricultural use of this land. In doing research into the tilted balance, it is clear that this is an approach that Hay Hill are trying as a desperate attempt to secure planning. To apply the tilted balance, you must show that there are no actual grounds for refusal, but the Thanet District Council Planning Committee and the Planning Inspectorate have given proper reasons. These are outside the settlement boundary of Monkton Village. As defined by the local plan, it is therefore this parcel of land is within the countryside for the purpose of planning policy. This has not changed. The Planning Inspectorate actually commented on the so-called tilting balance when he considered the appeal, and in his own words, this land is best and most versatile agricultural land. It is contrary to local plan policies SPO1 and SP24, which seek to locate housing predominantly within settlements and restrict developments in the countryside. It has been clearly stated that this site was until 2016 used as usable farming land, and detailed evidence has not been provided that circumstances have changed since 2016 to the extent that there is no longer any realistic proposal of the land being farmed. Indeed, interested parties state farming could resume immediately. It is worth noting that the new road layout will have a major impact on the residents of Monkton Street. In a statement made by Hay Hill, the inconsiderate parking of residents of Monkton Street and by removing the on-street parking will make Monkton Street safer. Actually, the inconsiderate parking is people parking outside their own homes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Once again, speaking on behalf of the Monkton Parish Council is Parish Councillor Brown.
Good evening again. As members are now aware, this application came before the committee in 2019. Although it did not comply with planning policy then, it was nonetheless recommended for approval, mainly to meet Thanet District Council shortfall in housing delivery. Members, we were pleased to see, voted against the application, and this decision, as we are aware, was later ratified in the appeal process. And here we are again, the same application, the same lack of compliance, the same reference to housing shortfall, and the same recommendation for approval. In their report, officers clearly highlight the fact that this proposal is contrary to both the local plan and planning policy on several counts. So why the recommendation to approve it? We have heard eloquence from the applicant himself tonight, but looking at the actual report, the answer seems to lie in the drive for housing delivery in Thanet, as is dictated by the local plan. So may I ask members to consider the following. In the local plan, Monkton is required to contribute 38 houses towards Thanet's housing delivery. Now, this may seem a small number, but we're a small village, just 262 houses. Prior to this evening, 46 houses have either already been built, are under construction, or have been granted planning approval. So in actual fact, we have already met and exceeded our local plan allocation. With Coles Yard agreed this evening, this figure is now increased to 83 new properties, well over twice our application. Add to this the 49 houses being considered here, and as other speakers have referenced this evening, the result would be a massive 50% increase in the number of houses in Monkton. This is purely and simply unsustainable. And it is hard not to draw the conclusion that the recommendation to approve this application is much more about balancing the books on housing delivery than it is a balanced, pragmatic application of planning policy. Should we be building at any cost, anywhere, just to balance the books? Of course we shouldn't. 147 letters of objection have been submitted from villagers, the Residents' Association, the local school, from the CPRE, other parish councils, and from residents and representative bodies all the way across Thanet. On behalf of all of these people, and particularly the community I represent, I cannot urge members strongly enough to refuse this application tonight. You have done so once, as has the Inspectorate. Please do so again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. I will now ask the Planning Officer, which I believe is Annabelle, to give her report.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is an outline application, as has been mentioned, for up to 49 dwellings, which does include access for consideration at this time, but with all other matters reserved for future consideration. The application site is outlined in red on the slide before you, and with Monkton Street running along the top of the slide here. Some members will indeed recognise the site from the previous application, but that was considered at Planning Committee in January last year. And that application was refused by members on 3 grounds. The loss of countryside and best and most fertile agricultural land, and 2 further technical reasons relating to not securing affordable housing and other planning obligations, and also the not securing the SAM contribution. That application was then dismissed at appeal in December of last year. Excuse me, and the appeal decision was attached to the report in the agenda for members to review. This application is indeed a resubmission of the previous application and needs to be considered on its own merits, given the fact that the council has now failed its housing delivery test. So this is the application site here, in this area here. You have Monkton Street running across the top, Fox Hunters to the east of the site. This is Seamark Close to the west, and this is the Coles Yard site we've just been looking at in the previous application. And this is another view of the site. So this is the site here, Monkton Street along here, and you can see its relationship with the Monkton Recreation ground to the south of the site. As has been mentioned, the site is not within the settlement of Monkton, but it is adjacent to the village. And as you can see, it has development or built form and landscaping along at least 3, or the majority of 3, potentially 3.5 of its sides. So along the Monkton Street frontage, along this site here, the Fox Hunter site, which does then wrap around to the rear of the site as well. So I'm going to take you down some photographs of the site so we can just have a look at it as it stands today. So this is the access to the site, and 102 Monkton Street to the right. This is again another view of the access. This is 96 Monkton Street, and again 102. And this is actually looking at the houses to fronting Monkton Street, so we're standing within the site at this point, and you can see Fox Hunters site wrapping round on the eastern boundary. So this is another view of the site, and looking across again to the eastern boundary, and you can see the units in the Fox Hunter site. This photograph is showing the southern boundary of the site, so the rear of the site, and you can see the spotlights and lighting here is actually lights on the recreation ground. So we're walking round and looking at the western boundary of the site here. So that's the site, the boundary that butts the Coles Yard site we just considered, members have just looked at. And we can see this again, the rear of the properties fronting Monkton Street. And then this is standing in the site looking up the access road towards Monkton Street. As mentioned, this is an outline application with only access to be considered. Whilst the details of the scheme are not to be considered at this time, a series of parameter plans have been submitted, and this is the land use parameter plan. So you can see here the blue areas, which is the areas that would be developed. And you can see they are fairly centrally located within the site, with open space and landscaping proposed around the edges of the site. So moving on to the building heights plan, the main developable area would consist of 2-storey dwellings with potentially some 2.5-2.5-storey dwellings in this sort of central location here. This is considered to be in keeping with the surrounding development in Monkton, which is a mix of bungalows and mainly 2-storey dwellings. The movement access plan here, it again shows the developable areas, the open space around the site. It highlights the central sort of spine road running through the development, secondary roads running off, and also the dotted lines here are pedestrian routes and footpaths. This is an illustrative master plan for the site showing how 49 dwellings could be accommodated on the site based on the parameter plans that we have just looked at. The developable area of the site is some 1.7 hectares, which with 49 dwellings would give a density of 29 dwellings per hectare. This is considered to be an appropriate density for a village location and similar to other recent developments that have been approved in Monkton and other Thanet villages. Members will be aware that this scheme does include some off-site highway works, and we'll have a look at those over the next few slides. So just to give some bearings, again, this is the access to the site here, the access to the Coles Yard site in this location here, and obviously Monkton Street running across with the school in this location here. So this plan actually does show all the highway works that are being proposed. The works are all accommodated on highway land. But it is quite a complicated plan, so we have broken it down so we can see it more clearly in individual parts as on some next slides. So this plan shows the proposed footpath here from the access to the application site that will be installed and run westwards towards the school. It also shows the giveaway that would be located in front of the school or adjacent to the school here, the build out, and then the narrowing of the carriageway to a single lane here, and then it widening out again and becoming 2-way in this location. These plans have been, at the request of KCC Highways, updated to reflect and show the access to the Coles Yard site here. So all the highway plans you'll see will have that access shown on them. So this is the photograph, shows the school and the current road layout in front of it. You can see the bus stop and there's also the bus stop on the opposite side of the road. These bus stops will remain in place, but they will be slightly moved in terms of the highway works. This photo is further along the road to the east. This is the access to the Coles Yard site we've just looked at here in front of the cars on the right hand side. And pretty much adjacent to sort of the school edge of the school wall would be where the giveaway sign would be for entrance for cars waiting for to enter the single lane carriageway, single story. So this is the plan, the highway plan of that. So you can see this is the access to Coles Yard site. The school is here, and you can see the giveaway sign there, so it's almost level with the edge of the school. And you can see the build out and the entrance to the single carriageway element that's being proposed. This photo is then moving further east again, away from the school, towards the access to the site. This is 108 Monckton Street, which members will note does directly in its current state abut the highway. This proposal shows the highway, works proposed along the area of the photograph you just looked at. So this is a number 108, and the school is here with the giveaway, proposed giveaway. So along this area, the road will actually be narrowed. So this is the bit that's the single story bit, widening out again to single lane, widening out again to 2 lanes as you move further east. But you will also note the sort of dotted pink purple line, that's the footpath. So it would actually be an improvement for number 108, will not sit abutting the highway. It would have that benefit of the footpath taking away from the highway. So this photograph shows the edge of the access to the application site and is looking westwards towards the school. The carriageway here will be slightly widened in the vicinity of where these cars are currently parked. It will be actual highway land that will be incorporated to make the road formally wider, and it does not affect the boundary treatments of any of the properties that you see on the right hand side. So this plan shows the access to the site, so on the bottom right here, and the area where the road will be widened, which is this element here. Members should note the proposed high works have gone through a safety audit. They have been tested for HGVs, buses, large and small cars, trailers carrying mobile homes, refuse vehicles and farm machinery and tractors and those sort of agricultural vehicles that might come through the village. KCC Highways have been consulted on the application and raised no objection to the proposed highway works subject to the imposition of conditions. And it was also noted that proposed works are almost identical to that proposed in the previous application, and there was no highway reason for refusal, either from the council or indeed when the appeal was dismissed. So as mentioned previously, the site is within the countryside for planning purposes, but the site is enclosed essentially on 3 sides by built form. So you have houses fronting Monckton Street, we have the Fox Hunter Park that wraps around the east and the southern boundary, and we have the development of the Coles Yard building site to the west boundary. But then, as we've heard, we've just granted consent for houses on that site as well. So it is not considered that there would be a major visual impact from long distance views of the development of this site. There would be impacts, but they would mainly be in limited close proximity of the site, and essentially from the direct, if you're standing in the direct view of the access to the site, you'd obviously be able to see it is developed rather than as it currently stands as a field. In terms of drainage, the scheme proposes that wastewater would go to the public sewer in Monckton Street. It's been acknowledged that this is likely to require a pumping station on the site, but that will be a matter for the Reserved Matters submission. In terms of surface water, a SUD scheme is proposed, including an attenuation basin, which is located in the illustrative master plan in this location. excuse me, the Environment Agency, Southern Water, KCC as the lead local flood authority, and also the River Stour Drainage Board have all reviewed the application and raised no objections to the drainage works subject to conditions. Moving on to ecology, the application was supported by an ecological appraisal, and as a result of that appraisal it was identified that a reptile study should be carried out, and that was done. KCC have reviewed both those documents and raised no objections, subject to a number of conditions which relate to the mitigation of those reports being carried out on site, and also ecological enhancements coming forward as part of the application. And finally, as mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, a Section 106 legal agreement has been received from the applicant and has been signed and sealed by the council. This secures the 30% affordable housing, the requested contributions, which include the SAM. So on that basis, officers consider that the benefits of the proposal outweigh the harm that would be caused from it in terms of loss of countryside, loss of agricultural land, and it is therefore recommended that the application be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Annabel. I recommend that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Could the Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman Cook. Members, do you wish to debate? Councillor Garner?
Thank you. Yeah, I have some very similar concerns to the previous application we discussed and approved majority-wise, treating these both in isolation. One's been treated and approved. We now come to this one. I find it very difficult even to consider approving this. This is going to have a major impact on the village of Monkton, as has been described by the two residents and by the parish councillor. It's a total transformation of the village on land that doesn't need, and countryside land that doesn't need to be developed. It was rejected by us at a previous planning committee meeting, and rejected by, that was upheld by the planning inspector. And I have to say, I find it quite distasteful that the zeal with which this is resubmitted in an attempt to exploit our the tilted balance in favour of developments as a result of not Thanet District Council, not us, not delivering the housing test, but on developers, other developers, not actually building the houses that they've been given permission for. And I do try, and I came into this unpredetermined as always, but there is no way that I can't imagine a way that anyone here is going to persuade me that I should support this awful development on countryside that will totally transform this village. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Councillor Keane.
Thank you. I know KCC have not highlighted any problems with the roads and traffic and that, but I just find that really hard to believe that this amount of traffic is not going to have a very negative effect. I noticed one of the comments, I think, from the Monkton Parish Council, the safety audit was carried out over a 1 hour period in July. This does not reflect the diverging traffic conditions during the day, especially during school drop-off and pick-up times, and I cannot see how the narrowing to one lane is going to not cause huge traffic problems, so I'm very dubious about that.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I did have a lot written down here, but a lot of it's already been said, which I totally support. There is already some considerable development on that site. and this is a piece of land which it isn't just surface water. In the winter, it regularly floods. It has minimal access to Monckton Street, and all it will do is add to the problems in Monckton. Those roads, I don't know what time they did their traffic survey, because I can't believe that a fire engine, a big lorry and whatever could go down that road without interrupting the traffic. I feel that this does not give any indication of any benefits to the area. And could I, just as a matter of interest, could I ask you when this went through the Flood Management Committee? Have you got a date, please?
Sorry, the Flood Management Committee. I do not know.
Well, then I won't be supporting this application. I really would like to know what date that assessment was done.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shonk.
I can't comment on the planning, but will comment on KCC, which we too are. I can't believe that KCC, can I report on that? I can't believe that they expect this traffic to go past that school. I'm KCC. I'd like to have much more information on that road that's going to affect the whole village. I've got nothing against the planning because I can't comment on that, but KCC, which we are, I don't know how that part got through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shonk. In fairness, I totally understand your KCC, but we're TDC tonight. Okay, it's Planning Committee of Thanet Council, which I'm sure you're aware of. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify with regards to highways work. So in terms of the safety audit that's been carried out and looked at by KCC, obviously when it comes to demonstrating harm to the highway network, it's got to be on the basis of evidence, and indeed it's got to be demonstrated. So this was looked at in the previous application for the same arrangement of a give way, single lane, and a new pedestrian footway on the south of Monckton Street. The application previously on that basis was not refused on the impact on highways, but it was considered by the inspector, who looked at the fact that the Highway Authority didn't object, the council didn't object, and nor on the basis of the information before had it been demonstrated that the arrangement proposed was dangerous, or that the existing relationship is dangerous, and indeed considered there was a moderate benefit to the highway. So I think in terms of potentially objecting to the application on the basis of a concern with regards to the highway arrangement would be unreasonable for this council to take. So that's my advice to you, members. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor King.
Then I would object on the change to the character and appearance of the area.
Thank you. Are there any other members wish to? Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. I hear what everyone has to say, and to some degree I do agree that it would change the character of the village, but I can't accept that the council looking to balance the books. We are addressing a genuine housing need. This is 49 homes with 30% affordable housing, which we desperately need, and I think that has to be considered in all applications. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Garner, you wish to come back?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one other thing, separate to what I've said before. I think it needs to be stated that I think it was mentioned that a new pumping station would be required to cope with these houses, and if we're going to be approving planning applications on the basis of Southern Water providing us with a new pumping station, bearing in mind that the effectiveness of their existing pumping stations, I would have further concerns to add to my previous ones. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Ian again to come back on.
Just to confirm, in terms of mitigating the impact of drainage on this site, obviously there are other requirements under other legislation which would require the functioning of the proposed pumping station. So in terms of considering the track record of Southern Water, then I would suggest that is given very limited weight, if any at all, in the determination of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkinson.
Thanks, Chair. Can I clarify, is there a difference of opinion about whether this is allocated in the local plan on the basis of, the interpreting whether or not this is within the countryside or not? Can I just get the officer view on that?
No, it's outside the urban confines in relation to the village confines of Moncton, so it is in the countryside.
Yes, carry on.
So it's not allocated land in the local plan then? No.
Thank you for that. I can't see any other members, so I'm going to put this to you. I put it forward to you that this is for a approval. For those in favour, please show their hands for approval. Those against? Abstentions? I'll abstain as well. Okay. That has fallen, so bear with me a moment, please. Members and members of the public could just hold fire for a few moments, please. I'll bring back in, if may, please.
Thank you, Chair. So obviously an important consideration that the members have looked at is the previous application for this site, which was obviously refused on a specific reason. So that reason looked at the impact from the loss of countryside outside the urban confines of the Thanet local plan, where the need for development has not been demonstrated to outweigh the need to protect the countryside, and the harm resulted from that loss is not sufficiently outweighed by the economic, social and environmental benefits, and it specifically referenced the old local plan policies, so that's what was under consideration at that time. Now the inspector's decision, which you've had in the agenda, so you've seen, outlined that it was considered there was minor harm to the landscape, indeed outlined it was also contrary, so that's SP 26, as also being contrary to SP 24. It does reference SP 01. Now SP 01 is the strategic policy for housing development in the district. Now, as outlined in the report, that policy is considered by the MPPF as out of date because the council has failed to meet the housing delivery test. Now, you've outlined the concerns with regards to the loss of the countryside, and it's clear that you've referred to the appeal decision and therefore have the same concerns that are outlined in that appeal decision. The appeal decision does also outline about the loss of best and most versatile land, which was included in the reason for refusal previously. However, in the inspector's decision, that impact from the loss of best and most versatile land was individually outweighed by the benefits of housing development. Okay, so the inspector didn't refuse it because there was loss of best and most versatile agricultural land. It was refused because of the loss of countryside, the minor harm to the landscape, as well as the spatial strategy of the district. So, in terms of proposing a motion to refuse the application, if members are so minded, it would be on the basis of what's been discussed in the previous appeal decision. The reason for refusal, we would suggest, does not include SP01, because that is out of date, as referred to by the relevant MPPF paragraph. But it would adapt to the previous reason for refusal, which would include referring to the specific issues that have been discussed this evening. So that would be the loss of the countryside, the landscape harm to the Stour Marshes landscape character area, again, where the need for development has not been demonstrated to outweigh the need to protect the countryside, and the harm resulted from the loss is not sufficiently outweighed by economic, social, and environmental benefits, contrary to policies SP 24, which is the development of the countryside policy, and SP 26, which is the landscape character area policy of the local plan 2020, and the relevant paragraph of the MPPF. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Members, you heard what Mr. Lunison has said there, and he does have things written down, which I don't, so that I will put as a proposal to to you. So I need a proposer. Councillor Bullmore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, so has SP01 been repealed and defunct, or is it still current?
So it's still, sorry, it still exists, but the particular paragraph of the MPBF says that any policy that is looking to effectively restrict where the supply of housing goes in a district, that policy is considered out of date if the council either can't demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land, or indeed that we don't meet the housing delivery test to a sufficient degree. So the issue is that that policy doesn't have any weight, which is why, as outlined, the tilted balance applies. Well, members consider that there is demonstrable harm that, in your view, outweighs the benefits from the scheme, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the reference, in our opinion, should be removed to SB01 and actually focus on the fact that this is development in the countryside and it results in harm, in your view, to the landscape character area, which is SB24 and SB26.
You have that, Councillor Moore? Okay, well, once again, coming back to Mr. Livingston did say was a proposer, what was stated. Councillor Garner, a seconder, please. No, you can't do both, Councillor Garner. Several, Councillor Moore, Paul Moore. Okay. Yes, please.
So the application would therefore be, the motion in front of members is for refusal that the proposal by virtue of its location would result in the loss of countryside and harm to the landscape character area outside the identified urban confines of the Thanet local plan. It's that the development has not been demonstrated to outweigh the need to protect the countryside, and the harm resulting from the loss is not sufficient, therefore outweighed by economic and social benefits, contrary to policies SP24 and SP26, the local plan 2020, and the national planning policy framework.
Thank you. And it has been proposed and seconded. Could I once again put it to yourselves? You've heard what Mr. Livingston has said there. Could I have a show of hands, please, if you agree? Against? Abstentions? Well, that is carried. Thank you, members. Thank you very much. Right, that concludes public speaking for this meeting. I will now call upon our clerk, James, to read out the remaining planning application. If I'll hold fire a moment, my people are leaving. I think
Stop.
Not yet.
Blue circle next to the council.
Not yet. Just a few moments.
Well, it's because it was outweighed by the benefits of the housing contract.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. So that concludes public speaking at the meeting. I will now call upon the clerk, James, to my right here, to read out the remaining planning applications. If there is any member who wishes to reserve, a little bit of hush, please. We haven't finished yet. A few minutes to go. If a member wishes to reserve an application that he reads out, will they please call out as he reads? James.
Thank you, Chair. So there are two applications remaining from the schedule, which is 5B for approval, 7 Guildford Lawn, Ramsgate, and 5C again for approval, which is the Kent Innovation Centre, Thanet Reach Business Park, Millennium Way.
Okay, I don't see any hands in the air, so could I have a proposer that they are moved for approval, both those items, please? Councillor Coleman Cook, seconder. Councillor Keane, do you all agree? Thank you, members. Okay, move on now to, you can't wait, can you? Agenda item 6, number 43 Queen Bertha Avenue, Birchington. It says politely down here, Councillor Keane, but I could say something else, I won't now. Councillor Keane has left the meeting because, as we all know, if councillor is involved in an application, they are asked to leave. So the planning officer will now outline the report. which is
Me.
Emma. Thank you, Emma.
So this is a lawful development certificate application for a proposed single-storey rear extension. So, as you've heard, it's come before members as the councillor is the applicant. So here's the application site in this area here, and the extension is to the rear, so on the left-hand side of the property. Sure, I haven't actually got an arrow there to show you.
It's not showing up.
Not showing up. Sorry, it's not showing up on the screen, but it's on the left-hand side is the rear extension to the property. Sorry, I'm not having much luck with the computer. So this is the existing elevations, and then this is the proposed. So the top right-hand side is the rear extension from the rear, and the bottom is the side view of the rear extension. So the extension measures 2.5 metres deep and 6.7 metres wide and 3.7 metres high. So the consideration is whether it complies with the criteria as set out within the general permitted development order. That requires that an extension could be no more than 3 metres in depth and no more than 4 metres in height. So the size of it does comply. And in terms of the materials, it is rendered to match the existing property, which is a requirement of a condition of Class A. And therefore, it is considered by us to be permitted development. So it's recommended for approval as a PD.
Thank you, Emma. I move the officer's recommendation is adopted. Could I have Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
This would be interested to any member wish to debate. No. Okay. That's been carried. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, do you agree? I'm sorry. It's late. I'm normally in bed. Sorry, do members agree? Yes. Any against?